So, hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Saskia and I'm a second year psychology student at the University of Southampton. So, I made this video last year and I'm wearing the same t-shirt because, I don't know, continuity? I'm wearing the same jumper, and basically what I'm going to do, you can already tell by the title, is go through all of the modules you do in year 2 at the University of Southampton. So obviously, a bit of a niche video. If you're not doing psychology, you're not at the University of Southampton, you probably don't care. Like, even if you're doing psychology at other universities, you might be interested, because I always want to know what other people are studying, because the BPS that like regulates psychology says you have to do certain things, but like they could be in completely different modules, or like a module that we've done this year could be done last year, like in first year for someone else. So, I am not going to give too many opinions in this video. I probably did in my first year one, but I don't want to give too many opinions because basically I am going to do a tier ranking my modules for second year, which, I have a lot of opinions. So this is being filmed first, so we'll go out first inevitably, but I am also going to do like my second semester and year review at Southampton, which will also have lots of opinions. So yeah, I'm just going to get started. I've written everything down because I don't quite remember what I've studied, and I've also not technically finished the course for each thing, but I know what we're studying because it's on a syllabus thing. So in semester 1 you will do social psychology, language and memory, research methods 3, and then an optional module. So if you are doing psychology with something else, you do language and memory and research methods 3. Social psychology is like the non-core one, and then the optional module is, I think you can kind of select it from anywhere. I'll get onto the optional module when I talk about my optional module. So for social psychology, it is what it says on the tin. It is social psychology. I find it a bit odd. I know I said I wasn't doing opinions, but I find it a bit odd that you don't do social psychology till second year. That to me seems like that should be a first year module, because you basically look at social cognition, social perception, self, justifying actions, conformity, group processes, attraction and prejudice. That is all very core of psychology. I don't know why we like did specialised stuff in year 1 but not social. I think has to be a year 1 module. It doesn't make sense because it's not like it's difficult either. It's not like the content is hard to wrap your head around. So for this you are assessed in 2 essays which are worth 80%. That is in your final assessment period, as in we had an 8-hour assessment period, 2 1,000 word essays, and then as like a coursework you have 18% social psychology journals. These are stupid. I said I wasn't doing opinions. I'm doing opinions, but like, yeah. You basically write, so like say we've just done conformity, you then write about like either an example in like the media or an example in your life about how you've conformed. So like let me give some examples of what I did. So I did like slut shaming, which was from aggression. I did slut shaming from sex education. I did evolutionary theories of attraction for Leonardo DiCaprio being a bit of a predator. I did justifying evil actions and dehumanising the enemy with Elphaba from Wicked. So it's a bit of an odd assessment method, but it ended up being okay to get good marks. The 2 essays were a bit odd because basically in social psych you have 2 lecturers, so I thought it would kind of be 1 essay on each person's topics, or just kind of 1 on like 2 very different things. It wasn't really that different, and they did plagiarise their own assessment. Like, you know, lecturers are very anti-plagiarism unless it's them plagiarising, because I went online and looked at the past exam papers because I was like, oh, well, it won't be these questions. The question that had come up about 6 times in the past 10 years came up again. They just plagiarised it again. And like, here's the thing, the questions were very odd. The first question was very much, it was about group conformity, jigsaw classrooms, but it very much said, explain the factors that affect conformity, explain the jigsaw classroom. It was like a paragraph question. The next question was just, explain factors that influence the self. Where am I supposed to go with that? It just lacks a bit of direction. Social psychology, I think, is a very useful module because social psychology is everything. Anytime there's people, it's social psychology. So yeah, that's probably what I'm going to say about that. That is what you do for social psychology. Then we have language and memory. Language and memory, we did 5 weeks of language, 6 weeks of memory. So the first 2 weeks were like the biological mechanisms of language and like what makes a language and looking at like animal languages. And then we had 3 weeks of like actual language. So we were looking at word processing, reading and speech perception. Then we had memory with a different lecturer. So we had one lecturer for the first 2 weeks, one lecturer for the next 3 weeks, and then one lecturer for the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, where we did working memory model, long-term memory, problem solving, eyewitness testimony, amnesia. So if you've done A-level psychology, that all sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? Because it's the same thing. Language and memory is not different to A-level psychology or IB psychology. We literally didn't do some kind of memory things that we did in the IB. Like the language is all new information. It's very rare to learn about language. It didn't really make sense though, I'm not gonna lie. And then the memory, I don't remember learning anything in my degree level psychology that I didn't learn from the IB. I think we did methods of assessing memory. I think that was new, but when we covered the working model of memory, it was in the exact same depth as in A-level. Like you just needed slightly different evaluative points, but very odd, not any different to A-level. Considering the second year module, concerning. So you then had, we were assessed on language and assessed on memory. So even though it's language and memory, I think it's just because they couldn't make it two separate modules, so they just combined them. So we had a 45% exam on language, which was answering short answer questions. These should be used more. No one likes them, but they're a good way to answer things that can't be done in an essay. So like language, you could have probably written an essay, but it wouldn't have been a flowy essay. So like I vlogged a language essay, the language exam, I'll probably put it in the cards, but it was literally just like a question of explain the Van Orden study, explain what productivity is in language and how animals display this. And it was just 200 words, bang. So that was okay. We then had a 53% exam in the exam period. This was not okay. This was very odd. So I think this was the first year they've ever done this, because I think last year it was a 1,000 word essay on memory, or like you just did an essay on memory, something easy that makes sense. No, they decided, what should we give our second year psychology students who know nothing about psychology because we haven't taught them anything? Let's make them design an entire study. Now, that could be okay, but we were told to find a gap in the literature. Let me reinforce this, a gap. A gap in the literature means it's not been studied before. You know? Or it like very much lacks studying. So I found a gap in the literature, which is that we did not know the biological components of the episodic buffer and how information goes from everything combining in an fMRI scanner. That was a gap in the literature. No, the gaps that she was wanting was, this study didn't have many participants, so we're going to add more participants. That's not a gap in the literature. I'm fuming about this exam. This exam, which was done in exam time, you also had to prep for severely. I had to very severely prep for it. I had to find a gap in the literature. I had to write an ethics statement, a statement of impact. I had to figure out just everything. My exam ended up being like 4,000 words, and then I didn't get a very good grade, but she also didn't give me very many negative marking points. So if they do that exam again, they've made a boo-boo. But yeah, if they do that exam again, a gap in the literature is not what you might think. A gap in the literature is just, this study doesn't have ecological validity. Let's do it in the real world. Crap like that. I'm fuming. So, Research Methods 3 is pretty much a direct continuation from Research Methods 1. So we do Research Methods 1, empirical studies. Research Methods 3, empirical studies. So your research method is data analysis, empirical studies is a shambles, and then you just kind of do that each year. So in Research Method 3, we literally just did t-tests, non-parametric t-tests, ANOVAs, non-parametric ANOVAs, correlations, regression. We also did ethics for a week, but we got assessed on it, and then chi-squared. So it was maths, it was pure maths. We have a 6-page formula sheet for our University of Psychology. We did the first 2 pages in year 1, the last 4 pages in year 2. This was okay. The lecture was quite nice. You have a 30% assessment on multiple choice questions. So basically, every like 2 or 3 Fridays, there'll be a multiple choice question set that came out of 10 or 20 questions on everything you've done from that week and before. So it could have been on first year stuff. That was okay, but bone to pick, said I wasn't doing opinions, you get normally distributed big. I got 90% in those multiple choice questions and I was given a 72. Tell me how that makes sense. And then you have a 70% in-person exam of just answering questions. And then you'll get a set of data and it will say run the appropriate test, calculate the rank sum, write the hypotheses. This, I don't think I spoke about it because I didn't end up vlogging it. This was stressful. I'm never slow in an exam. Never. The first question took me half an hour and we had 2 hours and 6 questions. 2 hours and 5 questions. I barely finished. As in I finished and barely had time to look back over. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. I didn't even ask for my raw mark for that one. I don't want to know how badly I was normally distributed. Like, I know I didn't do that well, but last year I got 86% and I was given a 66. Not happy with that one. So yeah, then your optional modules, you can do human origins, which I think is anthropology, intro to criminology, which is criminology, health psychology, which is the psychology module, and then I'm sure there's others, but those are the only 3 that I know people did. Oh, you can also do like your language modules. So like if you've chosen to do a minor in a language, you have like a language module across the year, I think. So we then did health psychology. Well, I did health psychology as my optional module. This looks at health psychology, I guess. If you've done health psychology in the IB, exactly the same thing. So we did behavioural theories, screening, paediatric health psychology, chronic pain, sexuality, placebos, and like just some other random bits and bobs. This had like 12 lecturers, as in we had one lecturer for 2 weeks, and then one lecturer for 1 week, another lecturer for 1 week, another lecturer for 1 week. Very odd. Not sure why, but yeah. Very inconsistent and also not particularly interesting or difficult. Quite boring actually. So we had a 50% when we had to design a health intervention. So if you don't know what health intervention is, it's basically like, oh, people aren't getting vaccinated, how will we make them get vaccinated? Oh, we're going to teach GPs more about vaccination so they can tell people to get vaccinated. Something like that. So 50% of your grade was on the intervention. You worked as a group to design an intervention, but this was not graded. You then got feedback on whether your intervention was any good, and then you could write that up if it was good or change it if it was bad. I changed my intervention, not that mine was bad, but didn't really like it, so I just mixed it up a bit. You then have a 50% exam. This was kind of odd. Like, I get that they kind of have to do a lot of questions, a lot of things, because they have so many bloody lecturers, but we had 3 questions, and it was 3 750-word questions. 750 words is odd. It's not a good amount, because it's not a short answer question, and like, it's close to an essay, but it's not really an essay because you can't really conclude. So our first question was like, oh, people say that health psychology has no place in understanding the COVID pandemic. Is this true? First of all, stolen from last year. Second of all, didn't really know what I was doing. Second question was then, do placebos work essentially? What is placebo analgesia? I have very big problems with this question because I was given a ridiculously low grade with no good justification. Everything I said was technically correct, but she didn't like my conclusion, so she took me down to a really low grade. This was also a 2-part question when they didn't, like, I know you had 750 words, but you had to decide where your words went. That didn't work for me. Third question was then about designing a formulation for a patient with cancer, I think? I barely remember learning this. And last year I actually did lectures, so did we really cover it? I don't know. But also, this question was stolen from the textbook. As in, exactly word for word, same patient, same type of cancer, same everything, stole it from the textbook. I mean, fair enough, because I got an 87 on that question, but I thought plagiarism was wrong. Is plagiarism only wrong when we do it? Yes. So, we then have semester 2. I don't know which ones are core and which ones are not. I assume we do empirical studies, perception, development, and then you pick an option. I think empirical studies is core. I feel like perception would be core over development because development's fun and perception sucks. But I'm not sure. So basically empirical studies 2 kind of continuation from empirical studies 1, but nothing to do with empirical studies 1. I don't really know why it's called empirical studies, because you don't learn anything. As in, you don't get taught. There are no lectures. There is no content. You get a set of e-tutorials, which are PowerPoint slides, and you then have to just write an entire report based on those PowerPoint slides. Yeah, really good. Love it. You do 4 modules, 4 things within this. So you do Unit A, which is... Unit A is like regression. Unit A was regressions? Unit B is worth 3%, it's useless, it's just a questionnaire. Unit C is ANOVAs, and Unit D is qualitative analysis. So like 4 kind of different areas, but we're not taught about them. And like all of our mid-module feedback, funnily enough, was, can you teach us? We don't understand this. And like, you should know all of this. No, we don't, because we've not been taught any of it. You also, oh Jesus, this is dumb. They have random multiple choice questions. As in like, you can't move on to A2 until you've done the quiz for A1. The quizzes don't make sense. As in, I think my quiz grade in Unit A was like 50%. And you can literally Google look for the answers in their slides, and they don't come up. So if that tells you anything about the quality of their slides, yeah, empirical studies, you're not taught. It's not a module. It's a module, but it's not a module. So we then have perception. Perception is like I think you kind of end up having a research methods module, a cognitive module, a social module, and a random module. So like research methods module, yeah, cognitive module, perception, social module, developmental. Like I feel like that's kind of how they try and work things out each semester. But basically perception, you learn about perception. So like vision, the retina, the cornea, the rods, the cones, your neurons, and how neurotransmission causes vision. We then have perceiving scenes, perceiving objects, perceiving motion, perceiving colour, hearing, and then the 5 other cutaneous senses. You basically just learn about perception. It's a bit odd in the sense that the first like 3 weeks are kind of all the same thing. The first 3 weeks are essentially just like, what is perception? How do you perceive? But it's basically just like, you have eyes, your eyes perceive, the image is flipped, your neurons fire. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah, so for this you have 5% multiple choice questions. So every week they release 5 multiple choice questions, which are definitely not stolen from the textbook, and the answers can be found on Quizlet. No, not my uni, they would never plagiarise. But you also, even though they are plagiarised and you can Google the answers, we have like 4 multiple choice questions, as in there's 1 answer, 1 multiple response question, which was never a multiple response question in the textbook. So it can't be turned into one, which means that you cannot get that question right. Or at least I can't. So with the answers, get 4 out of 5, because the 5th answer just can't be correct. So that's fun. You then have 20% coursework. This is group work. We all know how I feel about that one. And you basically have to make a 5-minute presentation on a visual perception illusion of some kind. Explain it, explain the perceptual mechanisms behind it, and kind of submit that, I guess. We're currently doing ours. It's not really fun. Perception to me, right, so we then have, in the exam period, a 73% essay. I think it's 2 1,000-word essays. Here's my thing. Perception is a cognitive module. Doesn't make sense to write an essay. In my mind, perception should have short answer questions. That would be perfect, explain how we perceive colour. Because you can't write an essay on these tiny things. So yeah, that one's a bit odd. We then have developmental. This is just that, I do that, but it's still quite a bad module. I still just hate all of them. Like at least perception, we've only kind of got 2 lecturers. Developmental, again, we just have like 5 lecturers. I don't really know who's teaching what, and I get confused. You learn, this is interesting content though. We learn about prenatal development, attachment styles, development of memory, development of emotion, development of language, development of parenting, development of identity, and peers. So it is interesting content, and it's something you can kind of gauge. Like, it's not too difficult, because like development of memory, you already know about memory. Development of language, you've learned about language. Attachment, you've already done in like A-levels. Emotion, we kind of did emotion. So it's kind of, this to me is like a logical model. This is a logical module because it builds off what you've actually learned before. So for this, you have a 45% critical evaluation. Very odd. So I don't think I ended up filming myself doing this because I didn't know what I was doing. But you basically get given a paper. So we looked at like how COVID influences IQ, and there was a study that said COVID reduces your IQ, and then there was an article from The Guardian that was like, oh my god, reduces your IQ. And we basically had to write a critical evaluation of that. So like, our title was called like Science in the Media, but then we had to evaluate the paper itself as well as the article. And there was no direction on this. There was no... We asked, and they were like, oh, we asked literally like, what are we evaluating? And they're like, oh, yeah. Does that answer my question? No. Very confusing. And then for this, we have a 53%, which was going to be in person, but is now online, multiple response questions. This is a very cognitive assessment method. Why are we not doing an essay? So we're basically going to get asked like, oh, in this study, what did they find? Tick the correct boxes. Or what can babies taste at 3 months? Tick the correct boxes. Where's the essay? Where's the beautiful developmental essay? That would be great. It doesn't exist. So you then have your optional module. The optional module you can pick. The psychology module is cognitive neuroscience. There is then like your language modules. There's the criminology module, which is crim psych. I chose crim psych because I don't really like the look of cognitive neuroscience. And also crim psych is the best module I've done. You know why? It's because it's not run by psychology. I'm not saying that psychology sucks, but crim psych is the best module I've done. So basically, you learn about like the criminology of victimization, sexual violence, mental disorders, serial murder, group crimes, terrorism, deception, police interviews. Mwah! All of it's interesting. You get set a ton of reading. He says buy the textbook. Don't. It's his textbook. It's the lecturer's textbook. We're not buying his textbook. Find a PDF online. Find someone else's summaries. If you go on StuDocs, they've got summaries of the textbook. We're not buying it. But the content is all beautiful. The PowerPoint slides are a bit iffy, right? But the reading itself tells you the content anyway. Mwah! Beautiful. I love it. We then have a slightly odd 5% multiple choice question at the very beginning of crim. And it basically just asks you, do you understand how you're being assessed? So like I do now have 5% of my modules secured at 100%. But it was just a bit odd. We then have a 95% coursework, which is nice but is also scary. We have no feedback in between to tell if it's good. And this is very similar to empirical studies. So your unit A, regression, your unit B is surveys, your unit C is then not the same, but it's the same as the unit D. So you have the qualitative analysis, and then unit D is just writing an essay. So I think this is really good because you get multiple methods of knowing stuff in an assessment, but you don't get feedback on it. Like I think this would be a great module to maybe do like a 50-50, as in like do a little bit of coursework and then do an essay in an exam period. So yes, a bit confusing. I'm also really stuck on my essay. My essay is like, how is criminological psychology influenced an area of something? And my thing is, I don't know. It kind of just hasn't it? I'm so glad I did crim psych, because clearly the thing that I should do is just not take psychology modules because they're very poorly run. All the lecturers in crim psych are so nice. I send them an email and I'm like, does this make sense? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. The other ones, I send them an email and they're like, we'll reply in a month. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, so that is how year 2 works. Not very well. Yeah, so I've not finished. We still have like the perception essays and the developmental MRQs and unit D of unit D of empirical. But I mean, I know I said I wasn't doing opinions, but you can probably gauge how I feel about most of these modules from just the way of speaking. I will slate my degree. I will continue to slate my degree because funnily enough, it's not very good. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, is that the psychology? Is that my university? Is it the lecturers? I don't know, because I think the content's okay, it's just, they're just not very good at doing it. It just isn't, I don't feel like I'm learning anything. I don't feel like I know anything. I don't feel like I've been taught anything other than in crim psych. So, yeah. I think last year I did not, yeah, like last year when I made this video I gave like recommendations. I don't know what I was recommending. Here's my recommendation actually. Find the past exam papers, because your lecturers are going to plagiarise from them. If your lecturers only use any examples in class, they're going to plagiarise from them for the exam. So if your lecturer gives examples, you know, remember that, because they'll plagiarise that in the exam. And also if there's a textbook that goes along with it, they could plagiarise the questions. I have a lot of anger. I always get told in kind of my videos that I'm too angry. Why are you just... You would be too. Trust me. You would also be fuming if you were me. There's also a lot more things I have going on at the moment that are problematic with my university, but I don't want to talk about them until they're complete. So yeah, but here's the thing. The module content, interesting, good. The module assessment methods, awful. The module running, sometimes okay, but not normally. The module plagiarism, big problem. Why is there so much plagiarism, and why are they allowed to get away with it? Why can they get away with it, but I wouldn't be able to plagiarise myself? As in, if I've written a really good essay a year ago, and I'm like, wow, that definition, mwah, beautiful. If I steal that from my own essay, I've plagiarised. And that's a problem, but they can plagiarise all of the questions from the textbook. And that's allowed. Yeah, bit confused, bit concerned. Basically, yeah, I'm gonna stop before I just give too many opinions, cry, get too aggressive. That is what you do in second year. I will do a video like this for third year, but third year I feel like it wouldn't be helpful when I do it, because you just pick optional modules. Like you have 3 compulsory modules and the other 5 are optional. So if you don't pick my optional modules, it wouldn't, yeah. We also haven't picked optional modules yet. I don't know when that happens. We also don't know anything about our dissertations yet. I don't know when we learn about that, but my degree's so organised. I love it.